So, welcome to the Lila Life Show. I'm your host, Linda Andrews, and I have the beautiful, outstanding Samia Pedalino, author, entrepreneur, communicator, and as I say, author of the Money Handbook, Spiritual Keys and Practices, Practical Steps to Finance. This is such serendipity. Welcome to the show, Samia. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We met years ago sitting in a Morgan Stanley office talking about our joys of our career. And here we are on the podcast on the Lila Life Show. Who would have thought? And I am just so happy to see you as a published author, and I'm excited to dive in today. We approach this topic around money through the lens of prosperity, which I think opens people up to a different angle and aspect to money than they may have originally thought. And things like scarcity, things like abundance, these all feel like words that can pack a lot of power or none. And I'm curious for you how you went from first how you got to a Morgan Stanley office, and then we can talk about that transformation into being an author, entrepreneur, and communicator. And I also knew you as the not store owner of Blessed
Yeah.
Boutique, and that was a
Yeah.
really exciting chapter too. So there's just so much here, and for anyone in the audience that may be feeling frustrated, down, hopeless, my intention is there's a gem of hope that can be a catalyst to you on your journey. So again, welcome, Samia.
Thank you.
So
Uh,
diving
your,
in.
your question of how did I end up at Morgan Stanley when we were there together? So Linda and I were in finance together. This is such a full circle moment for everyone who's listening. We were literally like 2 of 5 women in this office of like 70 men. And we were young, be as financial advisors, like
Yeah.
investing millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I remember Linda used to come in my office and she would sit down and I'm like, I know, I feel you. And we would just stare at each other like, what are we doing here?
Is this okay? Are we okay?
Like, are we okay? We're okay. We would have like okay check-ins.
Yeah.
Like, we
Yep.
can do this. So anyhow, I currently live in Northern California, like super northern, like in the mountains, like north of Sacramento.
Not to mention my favorite mountain, Mount Shasta.
Your favorite mountain, Mount Shasta, which is full of snow right now. But anyhow, I grew up in Florida, so our office that her and I were in years ago was in Palm Beach area, but I started out in like finance, like straight out of college, banking and finance, commercial lending at Wachovia. And then from commercial lending, I transitioned into becoming a financial advisor and coming over to Morgan Stanley. And I was there for like 5 or 6 years. And it was like great. I mean, you're basically immersed in the world of finance, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, just anything and everything that has to do with helping people build their wealth and create legacy. Because I know for me, I was on a team and a lot of our accounts were like 3 generations. So you have like the grandparents in their 80s, their kids in their 60s, their kids in their 30s and 40s. And so you're like managing like
and usually someone's not talking to someone.
Yes.
Usually.
There's like drama. Everyone has therapists. Going to yoga to like get the steam off, and stay centered. But anyhow, so it was just like total immersion of learning what the ultra wealthy do to create, sustain, and build wealth. And it was just like the greatest learning experience of my life, really, honestly. And so after I did that for years, an opportunity arose, and it was actually one of my clients was opening like a super high-end women's clothing store, just like a full like boutique in the Palm Beach area. And I ended up becoming business partners with her. And so that is how I transitioned out of finance into fashion. But the funny thing is I dealt with the same clientele. Mm-hmm. It's just instead of like investing their money, I was helping them spend it. So I went to this like fully male dominated industry. And then all of a sudden, like it was like an estrogen party. So I was like, whoa, what is happening?
It's funny, just side note, when I would see you in the boutique, I'd be like, I literally, as you said, estrogen dominated. I felt like it was the same, like, are you good? It's like that same
Yeah, I
opposite
know, it's the
check-in.
same
Like,
thing.
hey, you okay? Like, this is a lot of the other spectrum. Like,
Yeah. It's like
good,
a
good, yeah,
total other
okay.
end of the pendulum. Yeah.
That's
But
funny.
it was, I mean, I came alive. Like I just part giftings in me that like I didn't even know I had. Like when you own a business,
Mm,
you're the last one to get paid, right?
mm.
Like, and even with small business like that, we would do buying trips. We'd go to New York, we'd go to Italy, we'd go to Amsterdam, we'd import, and we had a denim bar, we had accessories, we had everything. It was like head to toe, dresses, shirts, shoes, you name it. So it was fun because, of course, I was shopping wholesale personally, but it's also fun because I was really just playing dress up every day and helping women, um, be styled for all the events and the weddings and the charities and the cruises and the luncheons and just it was just it was very purposeful and it was a great experience. And so I did that for many years too. It was like over 6 years that I was there, and I ended up selling it. And believe it or not, it's still there. It freaking made it through COVID, which
Wow.
I take so much pride in because I'm like, I
Yeah.
helped build that foundation, of the clientele, the
Wow.
brands, the branding of it. And so
Hmm.
it's just fun to see that that thing still has legs and it's still there. So I bless the new owner, but it's great. So anyhow, my husband and I ended up moving out to California, but we do like real estate investing and things like that currently. But it was such a fun season to go from finance to fashion. And I still use everything that I learned to this day. And I ended up writing this book called Money Handbook. And it's really just that. Like it's literally a handbook. There's a chapter on investing, there's a chapter on estate planning, there's a chapter on how to teach your kids about money, giving, mindsets. I did a chapter on mindsets because there's just so many people I've met that just like have limiting belief systems around it, or maybe they didn't come from money or they've never been around wealth. So they like don't even know it's possible. It's funny
Hmm.
when you put yourself in circles of people who have like what you want to attain, how all of a sudden you're like, oh, that seems possible. Like if
You're
he could
like,
do it,
wait,
surely.
he
Said
doesn't
like
seem
4 brain cells.
doesn't seem
You're
that
like, if this
smart.
guy can do it, surely I can do it. Or the other way, you're like, wow,
Yeah.
this person's really brilliant. Like,
Hmm.
I can glean from some of the tactics and wisdom that they've used to apply that to my own life. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Amazing. And for you
Yeah.
with the book, and I feel like with Blessed also, you've always, from me knowing you, been able to infuse your faith and your belief in the work that you're
Yeah.
doing. Where does that come from? And, what does that take from you to be able to access that? We can start with where it comes from.
Yeah. So I was raised in a traditional Jewish home. I'm Jewish. Samia, my name, it's Hebrew. And so it was really just a part of who I am. Like I was bat mitzvahed. I learned how to read and write Hebrew, been to Israel a few times. And it's just, culturally, it's like part of my DNA and my makeup and just something that has been, that I was born into really. And so uh, she mentioned Bless, the boutique that I owned with a friend of mine. It was called Bless Boutique. And really because we wanted women to feel blessed when they were shopping because
Mhm.
there's so much insecurity and like body image and body dysmorphia in South Florida. I mean, really everywhere, but it's
Mhm.
like pretty bad because South Florida is a beach town. So everyone just like walks around in bathing suits. So everyone, so there's a lot of that pressure. And so we wanted women of all faiths to just like feel good in how they were being dressed. And so we specifically bought, like when we were buying and things like that, we had that in mind, just to buy like things that flatter women where they felt comfortable and confident in it. So anyhow, in the book, I do talk about my faith and how that has really like guided me and centered me.
Mhm.
And so it has a lot to do with my upbringing. But really, even if you're not a person of faith, the book would bless you. And I think there's sort of like just some tidbits of what I learned, like in the Jewish culture of what they do generationally
Mhm.
in to help set up their children, and like the teachings I put in the book of like what I was taught as a child.
So beautiful. And
Yeah.
what I see so much in the world at large is like fear running the show, and the fear
Yeah.
translates to scarcity, and people can really get stuck in this. And you could see it, and we definitely saw it, where you'd have the most amounts of money sometimes being in this frequency or being in this mindset. And you spoke to this a little bit about the mindset, but how do you see people being able to go from that fear and that scarcity into, say, abundance? But what is it that shifts that? Like, what's the flip the switch that has to flip for people to make that jump? And how do you even realize you're in it?
So what I would say to that is I would think most people want to be walking in provision and prosperity,
Mhm.
right? Like if you ask 10 people, I would imagine not one of them would be like, "No, I'm good. No, thanks." They would all be like, "Yes, I want
So that
prosperity."
is that, do you feel like that could even be from where they are at present? Like most people would think like, hey, there's probably a little bit more no matter where
Yeah,
I am.
totally. Yes. And I think that the issue is how they're defining it,
Mhm.
because a lot of people define prosperity as money, and it's not just money. There's so much more to it than just that. Prosperity of your life is like right relationships.
Mhm.
It's like favor, like doors opening for you that like don't make any sense. It's divine health. That's prosperity. It's, meeting the person you're supposed to marry. That's prosperity of your life. And so it's every aspect of your life, your health, your relationships, yes, your finances too, your family. And so it's like an umbrella
Mhm.
over all of that. And sometimes when people only think it's money, they never end up getting a hold of it, is because they don't realize it touches on so many other things. And so it does really start with the mindset, because sometimes, people grew up in homes where it was like lack, everything was around lack. And so they don't know any different. You almost have to like reparent yourself,
Mhm.
and you have to change the way you speak and set goals to attain them. So if somebody was like, man, like I really would love to add another 100 grand to my bottom line every year. Yes, you can sit and meditate and be like, thank you, God, or thank you, universe, or thank you, Jesus, or whoever you're praying to for extra 100 grand. But like, it might not manifest in your lap in like wads of cash. You might have to be like, okay, what can I do? What actions can I take
Mhm.
to do that? And maybe that looks like saving a little bit of money up so you can have a down, payment on a rental property.
Mhm.
Go look for a duplex, look for a fourplex or whatever. And now you have something that's increasing in value,
Mhm.
and you just add it to your net worth. So, what I'm saying is, people who have a limiting or a lack mindset, in order to break it, sometimes it takes action, not just meditation, if that makes sense. Like, you have just
Absolutely.
doing the thing,
Mhm.
like taking the step, breaks the cycle of the generational stuff that maybe you're fighting with poverty. And so the issue is, a lot of people are afraid. They're like, I don't know how to make a plan. I don't know how to make the first step. I don't know. What if I make the wrong decision? They're afraid of the stock market, because there's different ways you can build your wealth. Yes, you can invest in the stock market 100%. It's long-term play, slow and steady wins the race. Over the last 10 years, the market's like gone up around 10% a year. Some years it goes up, some years it goes down, but on average, right?
Mhm.
Same with real estate. That's another way you can build your wealth. So there's different avenues. You just have to do what you are comfortable with. There's, in both, in real estate and like investing in the stock market, you don't really have full control over either.
Mhm.
So you have to sort of step out in a little bit of faith in any type of investing that you do. But back to your question, I always encourage people to do the thing. I'm like, okay, if you're feeling like there's lack in your life, you need to do something about it to change. It has to do with your words, and it has to do with how you think, but it also has to do with like what you're doing with your money. Is it working for you?
What traps do you see people get in terms of habits and patterns, like the actions that they're in that are preventing them from being able to access the prosperity?
Overspending.
Where does
Or
that come from?
it's like self-medication. Like, it's the same reason why people drink.
Yeah, I actually accumulated a ton of debt while I was at Morgan Stanley, and
Did
when I
you
left,
really?
yeah, I was like rolling debt on credit cards for years with zero
Wow.
interest because I just was like, oh, I'm making a ton of money. Like this is a lifestyle. Like, I don't know. It was such a weird, and I always felt like, well, the government has debt. This sounds so stupid, but it was like, oh, they have a big debt. Like there's a lot of debt. Like our country has debt. It was just like, it's not as bad as they say it is. And then it was like, yeah, that's true until you have to clean up your debt. And I had to do that. It was a really hard
Yeah.
experience. And it was like, but I touch on that of like the overconsumption. I could have
Yeah.
been a poster child for it. And it was like, when you're sitting there getting an order from Amazon and like not sure why you got it, and it was like an Instagram ad, and you're like, how did I get here? I remember that being like a low moment of like, I don't even remember that I bought this. It had gotten like that. I was like, whoa, we got to make some changes here.
Yeah.
So overconsumption, that's one of them. I
Yeah. The
interrupted,
other
but I,
thing is, some people are like good at saving, and
Mhm.
they go through and they, get rid of subscriptions they don't need anymore, or maybe that gym membership they haven't used in 2 years, and they're good
Mhm.
at like cutting the expenses and getting the budget like super tight. But sometimes it's not about your expenses, it's that you're under earning. That's a
Amen.
big one.
Mhm.
That's a big one. And so it's knowing your value
Mhm.
of the education that you have or the experience that you have, and stepping out and making sure like you're earning. And
When
so I encourage people, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you made that transition, like where did that lesson come from for you? Was that part of your transition into entrepreneurship with the boutique? Like when did you always know that?
So I would say the under earning aspect is more with like when I have done financial coaching with people.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually really felt, and maybe like my first job out of college, I was under earning,
Mm-hmm.
but you sort of just, it's like your first job. So you're like, okay, I'll
I
earn
guess
like,
this is
you know what I'm
what I do.
saying?
Yeah.
Like, fine. But I don't necessarily think you need to do that like your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
It does build character and it builds humility, but I would say it's for a season. And then once you gain years and years of experience and you've got it, the education and all of that, you need to make sure you're not under earning. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is, if they if they feel like, well, I don't feel like I have like a certain thing that I'm good at, there are so many like 1 year degrees and 2 year degrees
Mm-hmm.
you can get. I write about this in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's in the budgeting and overcoming chapter,
Okay.
that you can make like 6 figures a year. And so
Really?
yes, it's crazy. There's like fields you can go into with like
Mhm.
technology, even like dental hygienists and
Wow.
random things where you're like, how is this person making 120 grand a year? Like what? And it's like a 2 year degree, or it's like a 1 year program where you get like
Mm-hmm.
certified in something. And
Probably,
so
I maybe like my culinary, now that I think about it, when I did my
right,
culinary school. Yeah.
it's things like that where you can like make really good money. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I say to them is like, go do a little research, find out what programs are out there. And if you put aside like 1 year of your life or 2 years of your life, even if you have to take on a little bit of like student loans
Mm-hmm.
to then pay it off on the job you'll get, think about like the next 60 years of your life, how you're going to like make more money now. Because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are like short term thinking, like, oh, I don't want to go back to school for a year. Like, man, that seems really hard. Like, because maybe you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s and you're just like, I'm so past that. I would just say to you, you're worth it. You're worth it, because you're going to be on this earth, hopefully, like another 60 or 70 years. So if you can increase your income, it's worth it to put a year or two aside to be able to do that, and to have like be an expert in something, because you're the answer to somebody's prayer in their company. Companies are always looking for good people.
Mm.
And maybe you're supposed to start a business. Not everybody is cut out to be an employee, like
For a
really.
reason.
Yeah, like you really got to dig deep and see what are my strengths. And if that looks like taking personality tests or an Enneagram test or
Mm-hmm.
figuring it out, just ask their spouse. They'll tell you what you're really good at and what you're really bad at. So,
Usually unfiltered.
yeah. So that's all. I just always encourage people to like stretch themselves, to overcome mindsets, to just be an overcomer in general, and to be excellent in whatever you're doing, people will want you around.
And this, the action I feel is such an important, often overlooked piece of this puzzle. And it can be that messy, imperfect action. Your book has many action steps for people. And
Yes.
it can even just be take action, right? It's like whatever the
Right.
action is you need to take today, do that. I'm curious for you too, you have a background as a woman in finance
Yeah.
and, as an entrepreneur, as an author, what mindsets around being a woman in business have you had to overcome? There, can be messaging that can feel quite disempowering. Have you ever felt that? Like, how have you navigated that in your journey?
I think I've been underestimated for sure. But I go into situations expecting favor,
Mm.
and I communicate from that place. So I think the confidence makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I got this. I'm capable. I'm giving my ask, right? Of something
Mm-hmm.
that I need or want or I'm wanting to accomplish. And other times I didn't feel it at all, but I still gave the same delivery.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you do it afraid and sometimes you do it with confidence, but you have to always do it. You have to know within yourself your value.
Mm-hmm.
So that is part of it is identity, is
Mm-hmm.
knowing your worth. Because if you don't believe that you're worth, then they're not going to believe whoever you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So,
No
I mean,
matter who you are.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you got to know who you are. I think like in my 20s I cared a lot more about what people thought. You're just
Mm-hmm.
their opinions really mattered. You're just coming off like those teenage years, and then in my 30s that shifted where like I didn't care at all. And now that I'm going to be 40, if people aren't with me, if they're not for me, they're irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Your circle starts to get smaller, especially when you have a vision of like where you're going. So that's what I would say to those different age groups. And part of it has to do with just like developmentally and like your stages of life of where you are too.
Journey, experience.
Totally. Like you do, like I have definitely gained confidence through the experience and the people that I've interacted with and the different things, the different accomplishments, but you have to stay grounded and you have to stay humble because humility is the way forward.
Mm.
Nobody wants to hang out with a jerk who's like full of themselves.
Yeah. Met a couple people like that along the
Not
way.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to me when you say excellence, and this is something I think about a lot these days about how like excellence feels like the commodity.
Yeah.
And like the gap from like good to excellence is actually not that much different, it seems like, but it ripples in huge ways, like forever. And going from that good enough to like the good to
Yeah.
the excellent. Has there been times in your life where you felt at the good and like what gets you into the excellence? Is that your faith? Is that your mindset? Or have you always felt excellent?
I have not always felt excellent. I am human. I think the
Hey,
good to the
human, nice to
excellent.
meet you.
Yes. Um, what gets you from good to the excellence? So, from like a practical standpoint, it's probably doing about 20% extra.
Like to really hone in on what that looks like.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's all it takes. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like a little bit more. It's just like put on white gloves when you serve the food on a platter versus not. Like just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're having a party and you order like really beautiful chair covers. It's like all of a sudden, like, oh, it's excellent.
It's the one
It's just
touch.
it's just like it's just a little bit of a bump,
Mm-hmm.
Um, from a mindset aspect, 100% faith. I think it's really important to like I read a lot of scripture and it really helps me. The
Mm-hmm.
Psalms is wonderful and Proverbs is like full of wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and they're thousands of years old and they're like ancient scriptures, but they're amazing. And there's stories in there that you can like learn from other people's mistakes. But I would say that that really keeps me centered and that as a human, as a person, interacting with other people, like being able to forgive. Like there's just certain principles growing up Jewish that are taught. It's also in like the Christian faith too, and in
Mhm.
other faiths as well, but
Mhm.
different like basic things like forgiveness.
Yeah. Huge
You
healing
know,
tool.
like you don't, you do it for you,
Mhm.
not for the other person, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge for your body
Mhm.
and for your heart and for your emotions to not hold on to offense, because offense is like poison
Mhm.
and you just drink from it if you don't forgive that person. Like they're fine. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're the one dealing with all the things. So that's huge. And the other thing is giving. I think
Mhm.
generosity is a really, I actually think that that's like the secret. Generosity is definitely a secret to living an abundant life. It keeps you from greed and it keeps you thankful. There's something like we were created to give. Like there's something about us where I think our makeup, people, it does something to you when you're able to sow into somebody else's life, whether they're in need or not. Just to have like a giving nature and a generosity in your family and in your life, I think is really important.
It reminds me of the energetic of like the relationship is that giving and receiving. Like we're in a relay through this relationship. And then
Yeah.
like giving, receiving, and any point of stagnation, it's like, uh, just feels like the hose, it's like, oh, the
Hmm.
hose, it can't flow anymore.
And
And
I'm talking about little things like, you're at the coffee shop, you're like, I'm going to pick up the coffee of the person behind me. Why not? And just to see their face for the $7 that you just spent. You know what I'm saying? So I'm in California, like I
uh,
mentioned,
uh,
excuse me, in California, houses 50%, 50,
mhm.
of the entire nation's homeless population. So
Wow.
all in America, half of the homeless population lives in California.
Wow.
It's mostly in southern,
Hmm.
and it's mainly because of the climate, because it's like 70 degrees year round.
Hmm.
California is like the prettiest, most beautiful state we have,
Hmm.
with all the like parks and the
Hmm.
mountains and the skiing and the beaches. Like everything is here.
Hmm.
So one of the things I do is with my kids, is we have something called a blessing bag. You know those Ziploc bags that are like the freezer bags, a quarter
Yeah.
pound,
Yeah.
and we fill them with a bottle of water, socks, granola, baby wipes, things that like don't expire for like a year.
Hmm.
And I keep those back, like fill it to the top with a bunch of goodies, and I keep them in my car. And when we see homeless people, I just give them this big Ziploc bag of a bunch of stuff, because I'm like, and I tell them, like, we need you back in society. You had gifts and talents. There are things in you that we need. And I'm just like, be blessed. You know what I'm saying? There's only so
Hmm.
much you can say. And like, I don't care if they're on drugs.
Hmm.
I don't care if they're not in their right mind. I just, I think it's important to take care of the least of these. And
Hmm.
so little things like that. I just think you can incorporate things in your life where you're a generous person.
Hmm.
Or next time you go sell something on Facebook Marketplace, think to yourself, like, hey, do I know anyone who actually could just use this instead of like making $40? And just text them and be like, hey, do you need this? Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Dropping it off now.
it's thinking of other people
Hmm.
besides yourself. It keeps you
Shifting the
from being,
lens.
yes, it's like it's just not being selfish. And
Hmm.
so I don't know, I would just rather be known by my generosity even than by how wealthy I am. Like I would rather be known by my giving, but that's me personally.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit early on about the examples of like what's possible. And I think it's just so beautiful to hear you talk about these different values that you can express as an entrepreneur, as a
Mm,
prosperous woman in business, and
yeah.
be able to guide and lead people to say like it's okay to have these other pieces, like profits and the money piece is great,
Yeah.
and the and
Yeah.
I'm curious for you with your vision. Some people can feel cut off from their vision. They may have never even ever accessed vision. This could be part of the energy that puts them into a space of despair and feeling like, what are those gifts? What is for me? And, I love that you touch on the 1-year degrees and the being able to access, different opportunities that might not come first nature, but cultivating vision. And in your experience, how do you see people jumpstart this in their own life?
Cultivating vision.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got to write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Write that vision down. Each person is going to look different.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are wired to
Mm-hmm.
serve somebody else's vision.
Mm-hmm.
Think about these huge companies that are in the headlines right now. Twitter.
Which one? Yeah.
I know, right? Twitter, Facebook,
Yeah.
Apple, all these were all started by a couple people. And others came along and were like, I'm going to serve this vision. I believe in this. This is going to change the world. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So some of us are wired for that. We want to serve somebody else's vision. And that's amazing because you both need each other.
Mm-hmm.
Others are like, I am the visionary.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really depends which bucket you fall into.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are serving somebody else's vision, it's going to look like the attributes that you bring to the table to serve it. Okay, this is what I want to be for this company or this person and for my family. This is how I want to show up to my husband or to my wife or to my kids. So sometimes it looks simply like that. And if you are the visionary and you are the one trailblazing, creating the vision, then it's going to look like this is what my vision is. And these are the types of people I need around me to help me get there, because no one, I believe, who's had great success financially has ever done it alone. It always takes a team.
I love that distinction of which kind of bucket do you fall in. And maybe for some people, it could be a little even hybrid of maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking, could there be a hybrid where you're
There's
doing
no
both?
box.
Yeah,
Totally.
that, figure out your lane, but just seeing what gifts you have. And this is something that I would struggle with even sort of, but at Morgan Stanley, I remember distinctly being like, I'm a woman. I don't know a ton about money. Worst case scenario, I'm going to learn a lot and I can help other women understand money more, and it's interesting to see the path unfold. But this is, it's just so curious how, what was my why for going in at that point in time? And did that stay connected along the way? And I could always kind of get back to that answer. Sometimes I would feel a bit lost and disconnected from it. And then there became times where I was like, well, there's other ways to, to do that, and I find that vision alignment of saying, maybe you're not the visionary, but am I still tracking with these whys? And is this company even still connected to their why? It feels like we're in a time where people are wanting to see more transparency around what is the why and how are we actually doing that? And then feeling really aligned to that or not. And, it can be a polarizing environment in the world, but it does feel like people are more connected to their why than ever as a broad stroke. Yeah. But maybe that's nature's way, reminding people.
Yeah, I think 2020 changed a lot of things.
Yeah, it certainly did.
Besides people doing their landscaping, they were introspective. What am I doing with my life?
Yeah. Is there ever, you have your kids and you have a chapter in the book about kids and this next generation, access to prosperity, access to, these principles. Is there ever too young to start talking about it?
No, my son's 4. I give him $1 a week. He loves it. If he does different things above and beyond, what's kind of required of him as a 4-year-old. So I think that once they are potty trained and fully communicating, you can absolutely teach them what it looks like to make money and what it looks like to give. And what it looks like to invest if you want, you can get gold coins and play money and teach them. I really don't think there's ever too young of an age. Don't underestimate kids. They're such sponges. They learn quick.
What do you see in terms of innovations around finance and prosperity coming, if you had to take a look in the crystal ball from your own experiences, what could be lying ahead?
Innovations. I think blockchain technology is going to change a lot of things for us. Innovative wise, investments. I think you're going to see a lot of technology coming down the pipe, like even things like the Hyperloop being built and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. There's just things where you're like, this feels like a sci-fi movie, you know? Like, how is this even happening right now? But it is. And so technology really is moving us forward. It's interesting because I mentioned 2020. I actually think it pushed us forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like the working from home and what we're doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that was coming, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't coming for like 7 to 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it forced us, because everybody was in their houses, to innovate, to
Mm-hmm.
make things happen, to make sure products got on shelves, to make sure people were communicating and businesses were still being run. It pushed us to come up with solutions. And so sometimes, as crappy as things, you look back and you're like, that was a weird year, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as it, when things are bad, the good that comes from it is like when you're squeezed, what's in you comes out, in the sense of like, um, ideas and coming up with solutions. So in a way, I do think that the blockchain technology is going to shift a lot in years to come.
Awesome. It's an exciting time. It's a curious
Mhm.
time. It's really an interesting, it feels a little bit of values like recalibration as
Yeah,
a individual. I feel that. And as a collective, if I know other people are doing that, it has to change the collective.
right.
So I feel quite curious about what that's going to shake
Mhm.
out to be. How do you, aside from having glamour, express that fashion side that you got to experience with the boutique in that intersection with finance? Do you still get to tap into that in your life right now?
I mean, besides personally shopping,
Yeah.
I love interior design. And so it comes out that way. And I love styling my friends and cleaning their closets out. I just do it in my own circle, my own little
Cool.
influence. Yeah.
Keep the blessings flowing. That there's something about
Mhm.
lightening your load at home that it's like, wow, I'm a new human right now.
It just comes out of me. I was at my friend's house the other week, and she was getting ready and I was in her room and we were like waiting for some people to come over. And I turned behind me and like her closet doors were open and I like started to get anxiety and I was like, can I organize your closet? It needs help. She's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm just like color coordinating it, doing it by sleeve. I just like could not help
Oh,
myself. I'm like,
I
I
love
cannot
it.
be in this room staring at this closet without fixing it. So I just think when things are in you, they just come out, you know.
It's
You
gonna
just,
find a
wherever you
way.
are, wherever you
Hmm.
go, there you are.
Hmm. Well, amen.
Hmm.
Samia, thank you so much. If there's any final words of encouragement, I think people, if you read the headlines for any amount of time, probably these days, it can be easy to feel like,
Yeah.
what, and you hear different words specific to the economy. This is such a hot topic of fear, I feel right now. And if there's any words of hope or just ways that within yourself or when you're working with others that you can help them frame what they're seeing and remember the richness that we've been discussing about what power they have and the
Mhm.
wholeness and the worth and the access to that action.
Yeah.
But what can be some of those anchors that help them when they're feeling in the lower spots? And any closing thoughts you have?
I think that's a great question. One anchoring thought is I am enough.
Mm.
That's a really good one. And I would say another one is I forgive myself. I'm doing the
Mm.
best that I can.
So good. I could
Mhm.
feel like the weight from that.
Mhm.
Thank you so
So I would leave
much.
it with that. Mhm.
It's been a pleasure to have you. For everyone, what's your favorite way for people to buy your book?
It's on Amazon, and they
Cool.
can follow me on Instagram. I'm on there, just Samia Pedalino. I give a lot of finance tips and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We plan to grow rich with you, grow prosperous with you,
Yeah,
and
let's
keep
do
the
it.
vision going, sister. It's such an honor, and we'll see you all next time on the Lila Life Show.